the Raptors, who, as of right now, crazy. They're kind of on a little bit of a surge. The Raptors are finding ways to win games, which we've talked about before. You made the declaration that the ethical tanking is going to result in them having the number one pick, which would mean they would have Cooper Flagg, who would fit with anybody. But if not for him, who are some of the prospects who you have your eye on that could fit for what the Raptors are doing? As it stands right now, they would pick 7th. Puts them in an interesting spot because I do think that most of the guys that they would really like are probably going to go in the top 6, but so it goes.
Yeah, the Raptors are a funky team, man, because like as I was doing pod prep before this and I'm looking at the top players in this year's draft and trying to figure out like what would make sense for the Raptors. Like, so basically 2 years in a row now they've gone for like the pure shooter type. They went after Grady Dick, they went after Jacoby Walter, and both those guys have had their ups and downs as shooters, but have both shown enough flashes to prove that, all right, there's something there. So like I don't necessarily think that shooting is like a premier need for them anymore.
Yep.
So then you kind of look like they got Jakob Poeltl, who's really good, but he's always popping up in trade rumors. And at any point they can maybe decide to dump him and try and get whatever they can in return for him. So that's where, I joked about Kaman Malawach and obviously the connection with, with NBA Africa, NBA Academy Africa. I think that's going to be an inevitable tie to the Raptors if he's still on the board at that point. But like, I like Emmanuel Quickley a lot, but I'm not necessarily sold that that's their point guard of the future. And that's where I kind of look at someone like Kasparas Yakishonis. Like he's a talented player, talented playmaker who, again, like I love, like you can't speed him up. He has really tight handle. He's confident in his jump shot, solid finisher below the rim. As far as the defensive end goes, like hopefully the Raptors' length will be able to make up for some of that. But like he's a player who, when I watch him play, like I feel like he is the type of floor general the Raptors could use. So that's probably the player who I ended up settling on, if not for Kaman Malawach, because of all the ties that I feel like would make sense to Toronto and their need for an athletic rim protector like that. But yeah, Kasparas Yakishonis on Illinois is definitely someone to watch if you're a Raptors fan looking for who could we take in the lottery as a first round pick.
Yeah, tune in to see Will Riley and then stay to check out Yakishonis. We're locked in because that is, again, I'm giving the secret sauce. That's who I mocked to Toronto, actually.
Hey, let's go. All right.
We did not discuss this beforehand. A big part of it is because I have Malawach going before 7, but I think that would have been the perfect pick to do that. What I think about where the Raptors are right now is they don't really, like, if you're picking after 6, because I said, all those guys in the top 6, I think that you pick the best guy available. You don't worry about who is on your roster, because I think that the roster as we know it right now and the roster as we know it going into the off season is not going to be the roster on opening night. I think that if your name's not Scotty Barnes or Brandon Ingram, there's a chance you could get moved. And I think that as long as there's not positional overlap with those two guys, I don't think anybody is quote unquote safe from being traded for the right deal. I think that the pick could get traded. And maybe that's why they don't care so much about where the pick lands. Maybe they package that pick with some of the guys who are making a lot of money. That being said, I like the Yakishonis pick because it says, okay, this is another guy we talked about, listed at 6'6", 205, lead guard. He's soared up draft boards this year. Like you said, some turnover issues this year, but that's freshman guards. That is what it is. But I think that it just kind of fits the bill, and it puts the team in a position to say, okay, we got a guard, and now it's kind of a battle. You guys figure it out. And whatever fits what we want to do most, we stick with. And whoever doesn't, we move on. Because we see so many young guys also get packaged with picks and things like that to move on. And if he's good enough and talented enough and people rate him highly enough, there's going to be a market after the fact as well. So I think the Raptors, as much as it could be looked at as a disadvantage, it also could be looked at as an advantageous position, because the way this team's finding ways to win, the way they're assessing the talent that they have on the roster with Walter. They honestly nailed last year's draft, by the way, with Jacoby Walter and Jamal Shead. Shamshi as a project, and we treat him as such. And Jonathan Mobo looked good when he was on the court as well. So we know that this front office is good at drafting. There's no question that they're going to make the right selection, but a lot of it will depend on where they land and how the lottery balls, kind of play in their favor.